Okay, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. We did have 4 sessions, 8 lectures already. We did go through section 1, an introduction, essential introduction of the Bible, Old and the New Testament, the unique ones of the Bible, the meaning of the Bible. We talked about history of writing, the birth of the Bible, the form of our Bible today, Hebrew Bible, language of the Bible, and the inspiration of the Bible. Section 2, we did talk about the text of the Old Testament, the original translation, the ancient version, the Syriac version, the Latin version, and the Coptic version. Section 3, we did speak about the history of the English Bible. And section 4, the canon of the scripture. Section 5 was biblical archaeology. Section 6, the interpretation, and we said how the interpretation is important. It is not like translation, interpretation. You have to interpret the Bible by going through the whole Bible, not interpret verse by verse. And last week we did the geography of the Old Testament. So we did go through a big part of the course. Tonight, we will start section 8, which talk about the history of Israel. And when we discuss the history of Israel, you are discussing the whole Old Testament. Of course, there is a big section, Genesis 1 to 11. This is pre-history. That's a pre-history of Israel. And after that, from chapter 12, Genesis chapter 12, till the end of the Old Testament, that's the history basically of Israel. So, I have a couple of questions for you. You can get together, discuss it, and one of you will come with an answer for these 3 questions. What is the big idea of the Old Testament? What is the big idea of the New Testament? And why do we study the Old Testament? Some people say that Old Testament is not really practical to go through the Old Testament. We should learn the teaching of Jesus. We care more about Christ and after Christ, not before Christ. Is this true or false? Is there a relation between the Old Testament and the New Testament? Why do we study the Old Testament? Can you come with an answer? First, what is the big idea of the Old Testament? And what is the big idea of the New Testament? Nobody wanted to say anything? Okay. I will. First, before we start, I'm just going to review with you the Hebrew Bible. We said it contains the Old Testament, 24 books. You remember, it's called the Tanakh, and every other letter stands for a group. T for Torah, the law of Moses, the 5 first books we have today. Nebiyin, prophet, former and the later prophet. We use major and minor prophet. And Ketubim, or the writings, the books, which cover the rest of the book we have. The form of the Greek Bible we use today, We have the Old Testament. How many books?
39.
39, very good. So we did divided them in an easy way. We said 17, 5, 17, and we said we can do the first 17, 5, the 5 book of Moses, and then 12 book of history. Then we said the 5 book poetry and 17 book the prophets. Okay, what is the Old Testament story? As we said, Genesis 1 to 11 discuss the creation, the fall, creation in which chapter of Genesis?
1. No, the fall.
1 and 2, right? The fall, Adam and Eve,
3.
chapter 3, very good. And then the flood, chapter 6, Noah. And then the Tower of Babel, chapter 11. That's the prehistory. Then comes the history. We are talking about BC here. 2000 to 1500. We have the period of the patriarch. We are talking about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and one more, 5th patriarch. Anybody?
Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph.
The 5th patriarch. One book of the poetry. Job. Job is considered to be the 5th patriarch. Then 1500, you remember we said Moses started to write 1500 year BC. That's Exodus and Sinai. Then the period of the judge, which is covered by almost 400 years. Then the king of Israel and Judah, you remember how the kingdom was one and then was divided, and then the exile and restoration. So we have the first period is the Torah, 5 books, historical book, and then poetic book, prophetic books were written in the period where the kingdom started and then was divided. So Old Testament basically talk about a covenant between, what is the meaning of the word covenant? We said that
Contract.
agreement, contract, yes. So it is, when we say covenant in the Bible, we are talking about an agreement or a relation of God and the people. So we have a creation covenant, which is the Adamic covenant, meaning the covenant between God and Adam and Eve. God give the land, but in Hosea, like Adam, they have transgressed the covenant. There they have dealt treacherously against me. So we said the first covenant was with Adam, the Adamic covenant. And then when Adam fell, the salvation was promised. Then comes the Noahic covenant, or the covenant with Noah. And the renewal of the land. And we know that God promised Noah he will not destroy the whole earth by a flood like the time of Noah. Of course, there is flood everywhere in different place, but we cannot say that God is destroying the whole earth, all creations, like what happened during Noah. The Abrahamic covenant, the covenant with Abraham, the promise of a land, the land of Canaan, and the Mosaic covenant, blessing and cursing in the land. Then the Davidic covenant, first king for the nation of Israel, king over the land, and then removal from the land, which is the exile, and then return back to the land, and they let or they permit the nation of Israel to rebuild the temple. And then come the real king, dies for his kingdom, Christ. So in the Old Testament, in Jeremiah 31, verse 31 to 34, we see that God promised of the new covenant. So all the Old Testament was done to prepare humanity for the new covenant. So all the covenants from the Old Testament, from the beginning of the creation, the Adamic covenant, went through so that God prepare humanity for this covenant which God promised in Jeremiah. Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Not like the covenant which I made with their fathers, that was the Mosaic covenant, when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant, which they broke, though I was their husband, always in the Old Testament, when you see the word adultery, it doesn't have to be adultery like sexual adultery. No. When God say adultery, he is talking about going and worshipping other gods. That's considered to be theologically speaking, this is the adultery. So God saying, I was their husband, says the Lord. But this is the covenant which I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Lord. I will put my law within them. How do we take? And I will write it upon their hearts. How do we get in the New Testament? Baptism, very good. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And no longer shall each man teach his neighbor and each his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, says the Lord. For I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. Those are the benefit of the cross. Meaning, the cross, God gave us two great sacraments we practice now. Number one, the baptism. Those are, it relieves us from the original sin, the Adamic sin. And then the cross, through the communion, it's considered to be a renewal of the baptism. So the cross didn't just let us back to a relation with God the Father. No, it helped us, the cross helped us all our life. Every time you fall, you stand up, and through the cross, you are forgiving and so forth. So, here are the difference between Old and the New Testament. And without knowing the Old Testament good, you would not understand the benefit really of the New Testament. So, in the Old Testament, we have creation, right? God created man on his own image. Jesus came and he recreated man. And that is why we call Jesus the second Adam, right? Creation, Old Testament, as we will see, is concentrating on some people, just a land, the land of Canaan, just the nation of Israel, and they had a king, Saul, David, Solomon, and so forth. By the cross, Jesus recreated all people. As we will see, the Old Testament has the theme of election, when God chose Abraham, but through Abraham all nations will be blessed. So here we are talking about all people, the whole world, all nations, and the King, the King of Kings. This, in John, if I be lifted up from the earth, Jesus said, I will draw all men to myself. John 12:32. The temple, the vine, is the vine, and the servant, he came to serve. And the seed, as we will see, you need to concentrate on the seed, because when Adam and Eve fall, God put an enmity between the woman and her seeds. Okay? And the serpent and his seeds. Does the serpent, the devil has seeds? Yes, he did put a seed in Adam.
In the slide before that, what is the removal from the law, from the land, return to the land? In the slide before that. One more time. But that one. What is the removal after the Davidic covenant and between the new covenant?
Oh, the removal, the exile, we said.
Oh, okay, so that's
they took the land, they possessed the land of Canaan, and then they were exiled. First the northern kingdom by the Assyrian, and then the southern kingdom by Babylon.
So we believe that all these covenants, the Adamic, the creation, the Adamic, the Noahic, the Abrahamic, and the Mosaic and the David, all these covenants were created in the Old Testament, but after the new covenant, which is the salvation,
Christ, yeah.
There's no other covenant.
That's it.
That's it.
Yes.
So that would be
yes.
That would be the
for the whole earth, for all nations, not just for Israel. Okay, we are going to divide the Old Testament, the whole Old Testament, into stages by date. And the first column would have the time by date, all BC. Second column has the stage. Third column has the most important character or people. And in the last one, you have the events, what happened. From day one of the creation to 2165 BC, you don't have really to study the years. It's just, I want you to know which came first. Okay? So we have Genesis 1 to 11. Those you have to remember. Genesis 1 to 11 talk about creation, fall, flood, and the Tower of Babel. Hopefully, by tonight, by the end of the second lecture, we finish those. And the second stage, 2165 to 1804 BC, you have this all in your notes, huh? And I'm going to put those slides on the side. This period, which is Genesis 12, said first stage, Genesis 1 to 11, Genesis 12 to 50, talk about the birth of the Hebrew nation, the election of Abraham, Abrahamic covenant, the Jews in Egypt. Anybody remember the last chapter of Genesis talk about Jacob death, and then of course after that Jacob took his family and Joseph invited him to live in Egypt. So the Jews started their life in Egypt, and by the end of chapter 50 in Genesis, we see Joseph death, and then come the book of Exodus. So from Genesis 12 till Genesis 50, we are talking about the patriarch. It's patriarchal stage. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. I just added Job because Job, the book of Job, the story of Job happened during, most likely, some scholars say during the time of Jacob, other scholars said it's during the time between Abraham and Isaac. But most likely it happened during the first three patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that is why we call Job one of the patriarchs. Okay? Who wrote the book of Job? Anybody knows? Moses. Who said Moses? Yeah, very good. Excellent. Some scholar said it was one of his friends, the last friend who came and talked at the end of Job. But most of the scholars came with Moses. Why? Because if you look at the map, we will see that Moses flee from Egypt when he killed an Egyptian. He flee from Pharaoh and went to Midian. The story of Job happened in the land of Uz, which is close to the area of Midian. And it was said that somebody wrote the story of Job, and Moses, while visiting the land of Uz, found this story, he took it, and he edited it. Third stage, 1804 to 1405, Exodus. We're talking about the Exodus, the book of Exodus, Leviticus, Number, and Deuteronomy. Those are the rest of the book of Moses. Important people, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, brother and sister. And the event is the deliverance from Egypt, the building of the tabernacle, giving the law, and the Exodus. Fourth stage, 1405 to 1382, the conquest of Joshua, the book of Joshua. So main character is Joshua and Caleb. Why? Because only from that generation, only Joshua and Caleb are the two people who lived through all the wilderness, the 40 years in the wilderness, and they went into the land of Canaan. Moses never made it. Invasion of the land and the division of the land. Fifth stage, the time of the judge after the conquest of Canaan, and they possessed the land. This period is almost 400 years, and of course, we had how many judges? Anybody knows? 12. Oh, yeah. Okay. So we have 12 judges. We will concentrate on Deborah, Gideon, Samson. Those are the three heroes judge. And of course, you have Ruth, Eli, who is Elijah, and Samuel. Samuel is considered to be the last judge and the first prophet. You would tell me Samuel came after Moses. How come we say Samuel is the first prophet? Why? Samuel was a judge at the same time he was a priest, because he had to anoint the first king over Israel, King Saul. Samuel was considered to be the first prophet because he did, well, Moses did right too, but he was the last judge and a prophet. Okay. The story of Ruth come during this period. Then we have the kingdom, a United Kingdom, 1043 to 931. This you will find the two books of Samuel, the two books of King and Chronicle. Of course, what is the difference when you read the Chronicle 1 and 2, First Chronicle and Second Chronicle, and you read King, First King and Second King? Is there a difference? You probably will read the same story. In King, First King, Second King was written by Samuel, right? First Chronicle and Second Chronicle was written by the one who collected all Ezra. Very good. What is the difference? Samuel was a priest, was a prophet, so he was a good historian. So he wrote First King and Second King from a historical point of view, right? So he wrote everything he saw. A king who has really bad characters was a bad king. He would write everything he did. And this is the beauty of the Bible, right? Ezra was a scribe, excellent scribe, and he was a priest. Ezra wrote his book from a priest point of view. So Ezra eliminate all bad stuff during the kingdom, and even when the kingdom was divided, he would mention only everything good about David, everything good about Solomon. He would mention what David did, but he would say that he repented and God forgave him. So really, it is what God had his own plan with those kings. Then the division of the kingdom, the northern kingdom first, was divided. The division of the kingdom happened during the Jeroboam, which was the son of Solomon. And it was divided into southern kingdom and northern kingdom. You have here two kingdoms with all the prophets, And those prophets, we said the 12 prophets, 9 of them were before the exile, and the 3 were during the exile and post-exile. When I say oral prophet Elijah and Elisha, because they didn't write any book. They didn't write. The other prophet did write. The capture of the northern kingdom happened first by the Assyrian, and then 605 to 538 is the captivity of the second kingdom. We have, of course, in exile Daniel, destruction of the first temple and the fall of Babylon. And then came the return, Ezra, Esther, and Nehemiah, 3 of the history book, were after the exile and rebuilding the kingdom. So the earliest record of the Bible, the earliest record are concerned with the entire human race. We are talking about chapter 1 to 11. No election yet. No Israel yet. No Israel nation chosen by God yet. So the first 11 chapter of Genesis taking care of the entire human race, starting by Adam and finishing by the Tower of Babel. The very name Adam means man. The story of creation, fall, flood, presented in turn as a whole. The father of the nation of Israel was the call of Abraham in Genesis 12. And here we start Abraham, Isaac, Jacob stories. However, the attention became focused upon a particular family which subsequently developed into the nation of Israel. So we are talking about the election of one person. Why God elected to choose Abraham? Anybody? Of all these people on earth's back, as we will see, Noah, after the flood, was only 8 people, right? Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wife. Okay? So Noah had Shem, Japheth, and Ham, and from these 3 came all nations. And that is why we call Noah the father of nations. From all these nations, 70 descendants from these 3 men, God came and chose one person by the name of Abraham. Why? What was really something in Abraham let God preferred him, if you will, over all other men? His faith in God. And Abraham did love God. He did love God from the beginning. How we see that? Of course, the greatest sign of the love of Abraham is Isaac. Right? When he wanted to give Isaac as a sacrifice. That was from his heart. He didn't think of it. He didn't say a word. God told him, you take Isaac, you offer him as a sacrifice. He went and took Isaac. You know what? When we take the story of Abraham, Abraham did not show that he did, or it did not mention that he cried except one time in the whole few chapters talking about the story of Abraham. Anybody knows when? He cried only one time. He didn't cry when he took Isaac to give him as a sacrifice. He cried one time. Anybody? When he lost Sarai, his wife. Show us the loyalty to the wife. He didn't cry all his life, even when God asked him to offer. Imagine, he was waiting for a son all his life, his own son, and he cried when Sarah died. This means that he loved Sarah, his wife, all the way, and he wanted a son desperate all his life. He waited, and at the end he got a son, and God told him, take this son and kill him as a sacrifice. And he wouldn't argue with God. He wouldn't say why Isaac. And you know why? Because he did that, God said to Abraham, because you were willing to give me your only son, I am giving my only son to your descendant. And when we say Abraham descendant, we don't believe that the Israel as a nation really was chosen by God, but it was chosen by God to send his own son through the only nation who knew who is the real God. Understand? So, when Abraham gave God his only son, when we are talking about the descendant of Abraham, now we are the descendant of Abraham, the church. And that is why we said our father Abraham when we pray, right? He's not our father biologically, but he is our father because the descendant of Abraham. When Jesus said to the Jew, the Pharisees, you say you are children of Abraham. God, I tell you what, God can raise from this stone children for Abraham. You say that you are children of Abraham, but you are not, because if you are children of Abraham, you would do his work. Whatever Abraham did, had the faith in God, did good things all his life, you would be children of Abraham. So we are now the descendant of Abraham. So the idea of having the Israelites as the chosen people now doesn't apply.
During the time of Abraham, what other people were there?
Oh, there was plenty. Remember Sodom and Gomorrah? You remember? There was a lot of other nations. The Philistines are way before that. All the people of Canaan, as we said, you remember? Those nations, the Hittite, all those were there. So there was a lot of other nations.
What about Egypt? Was it?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Okay.
So if Abraham
Because Abraham fled to Egypt.
So if Abraham was from Egypt, Egypt would have been God's chosen people? If Abraham was in Egypt, would have Egypt been
God promised Abraham according to what he did. So he promised that his descendant will be blessed and will be like the star in the sky and the sand on the seashore. But his descendant got the promise. And when God promised, his promise is okay. His promise was fulfilled by the becoming. I promised you, Abraham, that through your descendant, all nations will be blessed. Meaning that I promised you that Christ will come through your descendant. Once Christ came, the promise was fulfilled from God's side, right? If the nation of Israel knew who is the real Christ, of course they would be way ahead of us. And it's true, whenever you have an Israelites till today, and at the end of when we come before the second coming, a lot of Israelites, a lot of Jews will come to the faith. Those are ahead of us. Those are ahead of us, for sure, because of God's promise. But since they didn't know Christ, so God's revelation was given only to the people of Israel. Now we're talking about the Pentateuch, the first 5 books. We call it Torah, as we said. This is in Hebrew, law or instruction. And the Pentateuch, it's a Greek word meaning 5 part or 5 book. Penta, 5. The book of Genesis, the creation. Till, we said creation, fall, flood, Babel, the Tower of Babel, and 12 to 50, the rest of Genesis talk about the 4 patriarchs till they went to Egypt. Exodus, deliverance from Egypt and the establishment of the Mosaic covenant. Leviticus, laws of worship. You know, Leviticus is all the Levites who were the priest. You know, Leviticus talk about the law of worshiping. Leviticus talk more about deacons than priests. Okay? In the book of Numbers, you will read more about priests. But they are all from the Levite descendant, Levite tribe. Numbers, talking about the wilderness, wandering, and Deuteronomy, law to new generation with a special emphasis to those entering the land. Why do I have Exodus in red? Anybody? Anybody can think of something?
Not written by Moses.
Yes, it's they went out of slavery after 400 years. The book of Exodus, especially before they went out, they had what we call, what did they do to get out after the 10 plague with Pharaoh? What was the last one? You guys teach Sunday school, right? You should know the 10 plagues, right? What is the last one?
The blood, the red Jordan.
Yes, the blood on, how do we call this? The Pentecost, the Passover. Yeah, I'm sorry, the Passover, okay? Everything in these Passover steps they had to do was all sign of Christ. Same as Moses delivered the Israelites after 430 years, to be exact, from Egypt, from slavery, Jesus came and Exodus all of us from the slavery of the devil, Satan, and his soldiers.
So why didn't Moses write Exodus?
Moses wrote Exodus.
What did Dr. George say? Why is it in red?
Yeah.
Hmm?
Yeah, I said. Yeah, he said. I don't know.
Moses took the Israelites from Egypt out of, so he delivered them out of Egypt. When in the Transfiguration, if you go back and read the incident of Transfiguration, who was in the Transfiguration with Jesus? Moses and Elijah. You know the three we're talking about? Exodus. Not Exodus, the old Exodus, but they were talking about the new Exodus, the salvation of Christ. So, there is a unity in these 5 books. The unity meaning these 5 books, if you put them together, you think that it is one book. You know, all the time, the Israelites, when they have, the book of Genesis was not named Genesis. The book of Genesis, always they name the book as the first 2 letters. Or the first word in the book. So Genesis was named as the book in the beginning. Exodus, these are the name. Leviticus, the Lord called to Moses, and so forth. When you read Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. Last verse in Genesis 50:26, so Joseph died, being 110 years, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. Look, Exodus 1:1. Now, بالعربي, when? It's a continuation, as if it's the same story, and we are turning just the page, not turning a book. Now, these are the name of the children of Israel. The last verse in Exodus finish throughout all their journey. He's talking about the house of Israel. And first verse in Leviticus, following book, now the Lord called to Moses. Last verse, Israel on Mount Sinai, and Numbers, now the Lord spoke to Moses. The last verse in Number, read, the Lord commanded the children of Israel by the hand of Moses in the plain of Moab, by the Jordan across from Jericho. Deuteronomy, when it starts by, not now, it starts by, these are the word which Moses spoke to all people. In Exodus, Leviticus, and the Number, it's all about God giving the law to Moses. So God spoke to Moses. In Deuteronomy, there is something different here. It reads, these are the word which Moses. So we know that the book of Deuteronomy, Moses gave 3 major sermons, and he gave everything he got from God to the people. Why? Because he knew that he was going to die. He wanted to finish his responsibility in preaching to the people God's law. Plus, nobody remained from his generation who left Egypt. All of them died. It all became, over 40 years, second and the third generation, right? Because only Joshua and Caleb went to the land, right? So he had to repeat everything to the new generation. These 5 books, actually mainly the book of Genesis, but these 5 books are the backbone for the rest, not just the Old Testament and the New Testament. When we talk theologically, because everything in the book of Genesis is considered to be as if you are planting a seed. So anything you find after Genesis, its seed is in the book of Genesis. Start always, it's the book of the beginning. The Pentateuch contains a chronological and theological progression of establishment of God's rule on earth through man over evil and over all creation. The book of Genesis, the creation of the world and man, the fall of man and the promised blessing of all people through Abraham. The book of Exodus, the redemption, as we said, deliverance, the redemption of the seed of Abraham out of bondage and the formation of these people to be a nation with a constitution, law. So, the redemption of the people, their bondage, 1 to 10, and then the redemption 11 to 18. This is Exodus. The formation of a people with a constitution, moral judgment, 19-20, social judgment, 21-24, and the cultural judgment, 25 to 40. The book of Leviticus, Israel culture is established by providing a manual of ordinance to help with their need when approaching God, worshiping, praying. The book of Numbers, wilderness, God orders Israel walk, military arrangement, census of the tribe, transport of the sacred tabernacle, but Israel disrupted the Lord's order. Nevertheless, the promised blessing cannot be frustrated from within or without. Holy Deuteronomy, the reconstitution of the nation under the Lord's leadership to enter the promised land. Framework, I will finish 2 minutes. The name Pentateuch, we said 5 books. We did discuss all that. From 12, we have the story of Abraham and his descendant. We can take a break here. Okay, Genesis is the book of the beginning. It's the beginning of everything. Genesis 1 to 11, event, predominant, creation, fall, flood. I'm repeating that so you know stuff by heart now. Genesis 12 to 50, the 4 patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. So Genesis 1 to 11, the race as a whole, and the family of Abraham after the election of Abraham. Over Genesis 1 to 11 cover a period of almost 2,000 years. And Genesis 12 to 50, the life of the 4 patriarchs, 250 years. So Genesis 12 to 50 talking about the patriarch as preparation to announce the incarnation of the Savior, and that is why I mentioned that God elect Abraham because of his faith and his love to God to come from his as a descendant of Abraham. So whatever the Israelites did during their history, good, it's good for them. Bad, they are spelled out. But because of God's promise to Abraham, Jesus came through Abraham. Here you see, if you want to take a note, Abraham story 12 to 25, Isaac, not too long. The Bible don't talk too much about Isaac, but Isaac life is covered, part of it with Abraham, 12 to 25, mainly 24 or 25. And as you see, it's 21 to 26, so all what we see talking about Isaac by himself is only one chapter, chapter 26, and not all the chapter by the way. Jacob, from 26 to 36, long story, because Jacob really was renamed by God from Jacob, meaning grabber, because he grabbed the heel of his twin brother, and he changed his name to Israel, and he became really Israel father. And then Joseph, of course, long chapter, too many chapters, 36 to 50. Of course, when you read in the beginning, God, Genesis 1, Elohim, we see right from the beginning, from the first verse, the Trinity, the who of creation, the work of creation, and the what of creation. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was unformed and unfilled. Okay? Unformed and unfilled. So, you take note of this. If you teach Sunday school, when you teach creation, this is the way you do it. Day 1 with day 4, because day 4 coincides with day 1. Day 1, God created the light. Day 4, He created the light bearer, which is the sun, moon, and the stars. Day 2, water and the sky was divided, and the day 5. So day 1 goes with day 4, day 2 goes with day 5. Fish, birds, fill water, and sky. Day 3, dry land, goes with day 6. Dry land and the vegetation. Day 6, animals and men. And day 7, the Sabbath, the rest of it. Day 6, then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God, He created him, male and female, He created them. God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. This means if you hear that gay and lesbian is from the Bible, it is not. It is not. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. So, God created man in His own image, in the image of God. God was the head, even though He gave Adam full power to be king over all the creation. He crowned the creation with Adam. So Adam was the crown of the whole creation. And stewardship, when we say He told him to take care of the animal, name the animal, and take care of the land. So stewardship and the basis for ecology.
On the previous slide, we have
let us make man in our image, the Trinity again. So, why are there two separate accounts of creation? We said creation, Genesis 1 and 2. Genesis 1, the heaven and the earth are created in 6 days. In Genesis 2, if you go back and check the creation of Adam and Eve, it's back in Genesis 2, creation of the man and the woman, and here no time element mentioned. You remember day 1 and the 2? Genesis 1, the panorama of the creation as a whole. In Genesis 2, detailed focus on one aspect of the creation. Genesis 1 center on God creating the heaven and the earth, and Genesis 2 center on man as the crowning act of God's creation. So God created everything and he crowned the creation with man. Heaven and earth created, God finished his work, 1, 2, 3. Man created, formed from dust, 4 to 9. Trees and river in garden given names. And you remember the garden of Eden was right in this area where now is Iraq. Very good. It's awake. Okay. Man assigned the task of guarding, stewardship, and keeping the garden, forbidden fruit, forbidden tree, 16:7. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, from any tree of the garden you may eat freely, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat from it, you shall surely die. Man in need of a helper, not good to be alone, and animals in garden are giving names. Woman created, formed from his rib. Was that a symbol for something in the New Testament? The church. Excellent. The church. When God was on the cross, Jesus was on the cross, from his rib came out blood and water, and this is the church came out from his rib. Adam, God put him to sleep. He didn't give him anesthesia, but he put him to sleep when he took a rib. It says in Genesis that he took a rib, so he put him to sleep first. And Jesus was dead on the cross. He was. And as the woman came out, the church came out. And that is why we always refer to God as his husband. Right. Creation complete, man and woman naked and unashamed. Unashamed, why? Why? Because they didn't know evil yet. So evil had no power whatsoever on Adam. For how long, we don't know. When Adam really fall, time-wise, we don't know. We don't know. But when God created Adam, he created Adam had the power and had all the character because he was created on the image of God. He had everything to protect him from anything coming from Sataanael and his soul, the devil. It is not an apple, it's just a fruit. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food and that it was a delight to the eyes and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, number one, she took from its fruit and ate. And she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. The fall, chapter 3. What are the results from their action of taking and eating from the forbidden fruit? I will put an enmity between the woman and between her seed and your seed. He shall bruise, he, it's only one, he shall bruise. He talked first about between you and the woman and between your seed and her seed. And then he, only one, shall bruise. So only one from a woman. One came from Saint Mary. You on the head and you shall bruise him on the heel. Talking about seed here. Seed of the woman. we know after the fall, Adam and Eve had a relation, and they got Cain and Abel. And we know the story of Cain and Abel. How is the Cain and Abel narrative related to the larger story of Genesis? Abel went and Cain killed Abel. Cain had, you read that in Genesis 4, a lot of descendant, and by the way, the descendant, when you go back and read Genesis, the descendant of Cain, one was built a city, one had Lamech, had two wives going with two women walking. So they all the descendant of Cain were all materialistic stuff. Abel though did put the correct sacrifice, because who taught Abel and Cain how to have a relation with God, how to pray to God, how to worship God, how to give sacrifice? It was God himself who established the first sacrifice on earth. When Adam was ashamed and God called him, he said, I was naked. So he covered himself with some fig leaves or whatever. And he said to him, no, it won't work that way, Adam. And God himself gave him cover from leather of an animal. Right? So God, and when we talk about God in the Old Testament, always you think of the Son of God. God the Son, not God the Father, because God the Father, nobody can see him. But those are an apparition of God the Son in the Old Testament. So when Moses was talking with God, he was talking. When Abraham was on the door of the tent, of his tent, and the three people came, that was Jesus, that was God the Son, with two angels. Okay? So, Cain descendant, of course, those are not the seed we are talking about coming from them. And Adam had a relation with his wife after Cain killed Abel, and she gave birth to a son and named him Seth. Of course, Seth is the good seed. That's where Christ will come from. For she said, God has appointed me another offspring in place of Abel. Yes?
So then, what do they need a woman to reproduce like Cain? So that, does that mean that Adam and Eve had daughters also?
She's
Speak
asking,
louder,
how
little.
did Cain and Abel reproduce?
Oh, how Cain and Abel, you know what? Adam and Eve did not just have Cain, Abel, and Seth. No. In the tradition, Adam and Eve had like 40 or 42 kids. So they did have a lot, and of course they married sister and brother. Yeah. God allowed back in the Old Testament for David to have 4 wives, for Abraham to have Sarah, Hagar, and after Sarah died and Hagar left, he married another woman called Keturah, and he had 6 children from her after that. So God allowed, because he told them to be fruitful. But of course, Christ, when he came, said, man, because too many women around and too many men around, so you don't have to. Now even relative marriage is not that good. So here she gave birth to Seth, for she said, God has appointed me another offspring. Literally speaking, this is another seed, because Abel was the good seed. He gave a good sacrifice to God, and God accepted his sacrifice. So if Cain did not kill Abel, Abel would be the father of Noah, right? Here another offspring, so literally another seed. Genesis 1:16, 1 to 6, Adam's sons, development of mankind. Something really very nice. You will be really surprised how it's amazing God work through the Old Testament. Genesis 7 to 11, Noah Ark and the flood. Ethnic development, because this is a table of nation. From Noah came all the nation. He is the father of the nation. At the end, 10 generations from Adam to Noah. And 10 generations from Noah to Terah. Who is Terah? He is the father of Abraham. So when you go through Genesis, you will find that 10 generations here, 10 person, and the 10 generations here. How it's symmetric. Genesis 6. Now it came about when man began to multiply on earth. This is the story of the flood. Now it came about when man began to multiply on the face of the land, and the daughters were born to them, that the sons of God, here we are talking about the sons of God. Sons of God meaning people who knew God. Sons of God saw that the daughters of man were beautiful, and they took wife for themselves whomever they chose. So they intermingling good people with bad people. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever. And here we got the flood. Sons of God refer to descendant of Seth. Preceding the chapter set forth contrast of the true lie. Man began to call on the name of the Lord. It is mankind that is punished in the flood. So marriage of godly seed to ungodly people is a common theme in Genesis. You were talking how people here. Make for yourself an ark, God said to Noah, of gopher wood. You shall make the ark with rooms, and shall cover it inside and out with pitch. This is the same word, TBTE, in Hebrew, that's ark, and same word is used for the ark into which baby Moses was placed. Here is the ark, 300 cubit. Of course, all this measurement has meaning. All numbers in the Old Testament has meaning. Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The covenant with Noah. Noah and the family came out of the ark, chapter 8, and the command not to eat blood. Of course, from Adam till Noah, people lived as vegetarian. First one who killed and eat was Noah, and after Noah. And of course, Noah was the father of the nation. The covenant with Noah included whoever killed has to be killed. That was the first time a law was applied for the nation. "40 days and the night and the water increase, and of course we all know the story. In the 7 months, on the 17th day of the month, it Ararat on the map would be up, which is Turkey now. The mountain of Ararat, this is where the Ark of Noah, and some new discovery, they proved it in this area. Genesis 9, the covenant with Noah. So what is a covenant? It's between, as we said, God and the people. I establish my covenant with you, and here God promised to Noah that he will not destroy the earth the same way.
That was the second covenant or the third covenant?
That is the second covenant, because we have Adamic covenant and Noahic covenant. Of course, Noah planted grapes and he got drunk. So we just finished with a new covenant, and Noah got drunk. Because he got drunk, we know the story of one of his 3 boys who saw the nakedness of his dad. Of course, it was something bad. He made fun of his dad, and it was it Canaan? No, he had Shem, Japheth, and Ham. It was Ham. But because God blessed Noah and his sons, so Noah, when he saw his son Ham did that, he cursed his son. He couldn't curse him because God blessed him already. Whoever God bless, no man can curse. And we are blessed. So forget about I'm having a bad luck, stuff like that. مديني عين. No. Doesn't. If you are blessed by God, no man on earth can curse you. But Shem and Japheth took a garment, and of course they got the blessing. Here, when Noah awoke from his wine, he knew what his youngest son had done to him. So he said, "Cursed be Canaan," not Ham, "a servant of servants he shall be to his brothers." He also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem." From Shem will come Abraham. "And let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth." May God enlarge Japheth. And you know what? This blessing, enlarge Japheth, you look at the table of nation, and you look at the descendant of Japheth are way more than Shem and Ham. There is 70 nations, most of them are descendant of Japheth. And when you see the land Japheth spread, I saw you the map last time, Japheth was all over the place, all Europe, Russia, those are the descendant of Japheth. "And let him dwell in the tent of..." Here, I have a question for you. "May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tent of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant, and let him dwell in the tent of Shem." Who is Shem? Shem is the father of, we said Abraham will come from Shem. He is the father of, from Shem will come Terah. Terah is the father of Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. So, it says here, let him dwell in the tent of Shem. That's the blessing, huh? "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tent of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. To whom does the pronoun refer? And let him, who is him? And let him dwell in the tent of Shem. You know when they built the tent back during the time of Moses, Moses took the Israelites out of Egypt, and they lived in the wilderness for how long? 40 years. For 40 years, they built the tabernacle, and they lived for 40 years in tent. The tabernacle was considered to be the temple because they give sacrifice in it, and it was a tent, but it was a movable tent. And God dwelled between, or in the midst of his people. And all around are the tent of the Israelites. And the tabernacle was the one in the middle, and as you can see, it was fenced all around. Okay? So, God dwelled in the midst of his people. Here, the blessing came to Shem, may God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tent, the tabernacle, of Shem. This means it was a prophecy from Noah that God will dwell in the midst of his people. So going back to the seed, Abel died, and Seth. From Seth come Enoch. Enoch got Noah, and Noah had Shem. Ham had Canaan, who was cursed. And so from Seth you have Enoch, Noah, Shem, and Abraham. This is the story of Babel. I will finish with this. Now the whole earth, this is Genesis 11. Now the whole earth used the same language and the same words. It came about as they journeyed east. They found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they settled here. By the way, land of Shinar, again, this is South Iraq. Now, this is where they built a huge building. This is how it looks. Because they said,
we want to reach God.
So if there is a flood, they would not vanish like during the time of Noah. And of course, God did what? Balbilhum. What is Balbilhum?
Made him speak.
Balbilhum. And Babel, of course, this is Babylonian, same thing. This is where the empire of Babel came and exiled the southern kingdom. So Genesis from Adam to Noah, 10, and from Noah to Terah, 10 generations. And the weird thing is Noah had 3 sons, and Terah, the father of Abraham, had 3 sons too. Easy to remember, huh? Okay. Next time we continue. Thank you.